So now we're going to look at the next one, up. Let's look at our thalamus. So here it is. You see it. There's the thalamus over here. Okay? And next to thalamus, you're going to write relay station right here. So what happens is, every sensation except for smell, that's the only one that goes directly to your temporal lobe. But every other sensation has to pass through the thalamus first. It's almost like the customer service, right? On the first floor, you go to the customer service and you say, how can I help? Oh, I need to see this. Oh, please go to the third floor and turn right. That's what the thalamus does, you see? Because when you get up to the cerebrum has its own job. Like if are you a sound sensation? Go to the temporal lobe. Or are you vision? Go to the occipital lobe. So it's the thalamus that directs that sensation where it's supposed to go. Does it make sense? Okay? So just think customer service, and it's right there in the center. See? On its way up. Next to thalamus, also write filter. So the thalamus filters, have you ever tried to study even if it's so noisy, right? And you're able to concentrate. That's because you have a thalamus. Or do you know your butt sitting on the chair? But now you do, because I just told you. Earlier you didn't even notice your butt. But you feeling the chair, right? Or your shoes, you don't feel that. You're leaning like that. You didn't feel that. But now you do, because I'm telling you. If your brain had to respond to every single sensation, you will go crazy. So that's why the thalamus filters. That's like your Brita filter. It filters what you call unnecessary information. If you're married, just like me, sometimes I say to you, maybe there was a day when the football was on, the Super Bowl, and then you go home and you walk, you had a haircut, or maybe you had a facial or whatever, you're waiting for them to notice you, they don't see anything.
Don't do
or nothing, right? Or you're walking, you're showing your property, but you and they don't notice you. You think that they don't love you anymore, but it's not that. You were just not necessary at that point. What was necessary was the football game, you see? That's because they have a thalamus. It's working. A healthy thalamus. It's a filter. Okay? Okay. Have you heard of the limbic lobe? So we're going up. Now we're actually getting to the cerebrum. But before we get to the actual cerebrum, there is a lobe here called the limbic lobe. It's referred to as a functional, meaning there are no actual anatomical boundaries to the limbic lobe. There's debate on where it begins, or the actual, the anatomies, there's disagreement as far as anatomical boundaries, so they just call it a functional lobe. This is your emotional brain. Look at the function of the limbic lobe. It's your emotional brain, number one. It links the unconscious with the conscious part. Does it make sense? Everything we have discussed so far is unconscious, right? Your heart rate, your breathing, your hunger, the level of glucose, all of that is unconscious. And that's monitored by the structures that we have discussed so far. So next will be the cerebrum, which is the seat of awareness. So the limbic lobe links the two of them. L for limb. Limbic is also your emotional brain. The third function of the limbic lobe, it's for memory, storage, and retrieval. So, you know, when you open, they say when you go home and you open the door, you smell, let's say, chocolate chip cookies, and you remember, right? Brings back memories of your childhood. It's because of the limbic lobe. It's all stored in there. You know, you remember the first time, your first kiss. All of that, it's over there. And so I remember when we were dating, me and my Baba, way back in the year 2000, we were just dating. And when I remember, I had my, my favorite perfume, and he loved it. So before I left, I would always spray so he remembers. You see, it worked. See? So that's the function of the limbic lobe. Okay. So now we go up. Now we have the cerebrum. The cerebrum is the largest part of the brain right here. It's called the seat of intelligence over here. So remember, don't forget, anything that does not reach the cerebrum, you're not aware of. So, in other words, the cerebrum is the somatic part, right? If you're aware of, what is it you're aware of? Or what can you control? Just skeletal, right? And where is your skeletal muscle? It's under your skin. So anything that has something to do with your skin is referred to as somatic. Okay, when you see the word somatic, nervous system, it must be skin, because under my skin is skeletal muscle. So somatic sensations are like your touch, anything here. Temperature, right? Tickle, itch, pressure here. All of that called somatic sensation. Inside, you call them visceral sensations. And that's another part of the nervous system called the autonomic nervous system. So, what I want you to appreciate before we study the different parts of the cerebrum is a few things. Number one, they look alike, don't they? Right? But even if they look alike, the function of the right is different from the function of the left, right? That's called hemispheric dominance or hemispheric lateralization, isn't it? They say if you're so right brain, or you're so right brain, you're so left brain, right? People who are, the right side of the brain is responsible for facial recognition and your artistic and musical awareness. So this is your artistic side. And that's why when you have a patient, you think some neurological problem, what are the questions they ask? They ask, do you recognize this individual? If you recognize the person, then more than likely the right side is okay. Maybe the left side is the problem. Then they look for right paralysis, right? Okay, the left side is for science and logic. So math, spoken and written language. So if the patient comes in, problem with speaking, garbled speech, you know left brain weak or left brain problem. Or you say, what's 1 plus 1? Or 2 plus 2, something like that, right? To check for left brain function. In the test, in the lab exam or in the test, I used to have like a half of a brain, and I have it on the table, and I asked, what side of the cerebrum do you think is this one? So I always cut the brain so that everything else is left, and I only have the cerebrum. And I always ask, what side is this one? You're going to write right or left. And then I'll ask, what do you think? What are the characteristics? The personality, or what functions are responsible? What is this side responsible for as far as functions are concerned? Okay? And then, so number one, the right. We already have two things, right? The right controls the left, left controls the right. Then they have their own function. And the third one, to me, this is the most, every time I get to this part, I'm just always so happy. You're going to write down overlapping of function. Overlapping of function. So, when we study the cerebrum, right here, we're going to study each and every lobe of the cerebrum as having its own function. But God loves us so much that even if this gets, we know that neurons, the injury is permanent, they don't regenerate. But you've heard of some people who suffered a major stroke, but then many years later, maybe after 6 months, you see them again, it looks like they never even had a stroke because of that overlapping of function. Physical therapy can train the other part that's not injured to take over the job of the injured part to a certain extent. Overlapping of function. Okay?
Is that how when like little kids or small children, when they lose like an entire hemisphere, the other side just completely takes over?
Yes. But overlapping, yes, you can train it. There's people who have lost a complete, wow, okay.
They actually removed an entire hemisphere.
Wow.
From, I think it was like a 3 or 4 year old. And when you see him in his 20s, you wouldn't know.
Yeah. So, but you
wrong.
have to be patient in training that because it has to learn it. But there's hope in there, okay? So that's why they say neurology is just a baby science because there's more to discover. It's a fascinating branch of science, okay? So before we study the different parts of the cerebrum, we cut it open and we see that there's 2 parts to the cerebrum. The gray area or the cortex. So the cortex is always the covering, right? So cortex is gray and then there's that white matter. So if you look at this one right here, you will see the gray outside and the white inside, the white matter. You see very faint, but this is showing you the reason for the difference in shades, the gray versus the white, is because you have 3 parts in a neuron, right? The cell body, the dendrites, and the axon. If you look at which do you think will be dark? Would it be the cell body, dendrites, or axon?
It would be the cell body, wouldn't it?
The cell body, because in the cell body you have the nucleus, right? Plus you have all the organelles there that's busy making the neurotransmitters. So the cell body has a dark pigment. And so the cell body is big. Just imagine if you have 1,000 balloons, right? The balloons, you see the balloon heads floating up in the air, but then the 1,000 strands, you can just hold them in one hand, right? So these are the axons, and they're the ones that make up the white matter. Because axons mostly are myelinated, and myelin is fat, and it's light in color. So the white matter is where you will find the axons. And the axons form what you call tracts. Tracts. So we're going to look at the white matter first. And it's made up of tracts or fibers. So this is nothing but axons. So depending on where you find them and what they do, you call these tracts association tracts, projection tracts, or commissural tracts or fibers. What are they again? The axons. This is the one that you see right here. So we're studying the cerebrum in terms of the cell bodies and the axons. First, we look at the axons. And the axons are found in the white matter. And the axons, you call them association if they connect one gyrus to the next. The folds, these folds, you see the folds of the cerebrum? The folds are called gyrus. right here. Each and every fold is called a gyrus. And then the depression right here is called a sulcus. Okay? So see, sulcus. The space in between the gyrus is called a sulcus, and the fold is called a gyrus. And so you see there's white matter right there. So the axon that connects this gyrus to the next, and this one maybe to the next, is called association tract. Like within your neighborhood, you have the association, the neighborhood association. So they just connect one gyrus to the next, one neighbor to the next, right? That's what the association do among neighbors, only within just one neighborhood. Okay? Next, the next fiber in your white matter. Oh, okay. What cellular process in that? Remember, what do they affect? What do they do? They say all hormones when they enter the cell, they target what activities.
No.
Okay. Okay. So in addition, next to your association fibers, do you have any question on the association fiber? Next, there is what you call your projection fibers. So right here, I'm going to go back to this picture. Right here. So there's axons, okay? There's the cell body, dendrites. There's axons that go all the way down. Those are your projections. They project like the projector. See, it projects. So use keywords association within every neighbor. Projection, you project all the way down to the spinal cord. Those are projections. What are they again? They're nothing but the axons. They're just called fibers or tracts. They're all the same. Axons, fibers, or tracts. Okay? So if you wrote axons, that's still correct. Just think that the brain is made up of the neuron, the cell body, the dendrites, and the axon. Okay? Okay? Then last, the third type of axons, or the third group of axons or tracts that make up your cerebrum are called your commissural fibers. Commissural. So the commissural fibers connect the right with the left. So that's how they communicate, the right and the left. So you see? So that's why you're aware of what your right hand is doing.
So if you ask which structure, or maybe not structure, which connects the right and left hemispheres, would it be the
Commissural,
fibers,
yes.
or would it be the corpus callosum?
The corpus callosum is commissural fibers.
Oh, okay.
Very good. The corpus callosum is the commissural tract. Okay? And so if that gets cut, you're not aware of what your right is doing. Same with your left. Okay? Okay. Now, we're ready to look at our cerebrum. So if you look at this cerebrum, you will see that there are different lobes over here. Lobes. So this is your, I'm going to use a different one before I I might as well use that one. Okay, we're going to get to that part anyway. So here, this is the frontal part, and this is the back part, the occipital. So the first lobe, so there are lobes to the cerebrum, okay? Right here. In the test, if you forget, just ask me and I will help you. I'll not give you the answer, but I'll help you remember. So here, this is the cerebrum. We're now studying the cortex part. We're now studying the nucleus and the dendrite part of every axon. They're located in the cortex. We studied what the axon part of your neuron, what it does. It's association, projection, and commissura. Now we're going to look at the cell body. Isn't it that the cell body is the one that integrates the information? And so in the frontal lobe, next to frontal lobe, you're going to write motor. So the frontal lobe is the beginning of your motor neurons. In other words, if you have an injury to the frontal lobe, does it make sense? You will have paralysis. Okay? So that when the patient comes in, can't move any part of the body, you know there's a frontal problem, frontal lobe problem. Okay? So it contains, the motor neurons. Next, the next lobe is called the parietal lobe. So it's right here. Okay. So next to parietal lobe, you're going to write sensory. So by the way, this is all somatic. Okay, the function of the cerebrum is somatic because it's conscious. That's the only part that we are aware of, right? So you say somatic motor. The effector organs in the frontal lobe is just skeletal muscle, right? That's the only one that it stimulates to contract, skeletal muscle, okay? The cerebrum. And the parietal lobe it takes care of somatic sensations. Touch, temperature, itch, all of the somatic sensations. It goes to your parietal lobe. So if there's an injury to the parietal lobe, you can't feel. And by the way, there is the way they what do you call this? When it reaches the brain, there's a map called the homunculus, and it's in your book, the sensory homunculus and a motor homunculus. In other words, they have their own parts right there. Let's say this part of the parietal lobe is for sensations of touch, maybe in your hands. This one for the arm. This one for the face, for the lips. You see? So if this is injured, you're only going to have a problem with sensations right here in this area. Does it make sense? So it has its own headquarters. It's very, very precise. Okay, and the same here in the frontal lobe. Okay? Next. Oh, also next to the parietal lobe, please write taste. So the parietal lobe is also the headquarters for taste sensations. Okay? Next, you're going to write the temporal lobe. And next, make the temporal lobe a capital T. So that this is your nose and there's your ears hanging like that. Okay? Because letter T. The temporal lobe is the headquarters for auditory and smell sensation, smell olfactory. So if your temporal lobe is injured, you can't hear, you can't smell. It's the one that makes you aware of that sound. If this part of the brain is injured, even if my ear is working, I'll be deaf. I can't hear because I can't process that information. Okay? Next, you have your occipital lobe. And next to occipital lobe, vision. So that's the one that takes care of visual sensations. Okay? And then there is a fifth lobe called the insula, which you have to open up right here. You see the insula. You have to take out the temporal lobe so you can see the insula. It's inside. And next to insula, also right taste. So parietal lobe and insula is for taste. Okay? Now, if you notice, if we look at this part right here, you look at this one. You notice it says here, primary somatosensory area in the parietal lobe. And then surrounding it, there is always an association area. You see that? Same with, primary auditory area in the temporal. Then surrounding it, there's an association area. In every lobe that we talked about, it has its own function. But surrounding it, there is always an association area. Because, like, let's say here, okay? So, my primary visual area lets me see these figures. I just see figures. Then, so that's the primary visual area. Then it goes to the association area. The association area lets me figure out that I see letters. You see? So the primary association, I see something. I see an object. Then goes to the association, it's letters. Then there is what you call an integrative area. See that? The common integrative area, you see that? Which integrates everything, and it's on the left side, right? Mainly on that's why the left is the most dominant. That's the one that integrates everything. So then I will say, oh, it says free pizza today. Oh. It's a step by step by step. Or you hear, let's say I hear a sound. The sound I heard because it reached my primary auditory area. Then, oh, it's a person's voice calling me. That's the auditory association. Then, the integrated, oh, it's Lily calling me. So I smile and I go. But if I say, oh, it's Baba calling me, so I don't answer. Integrative center. Does it make sense? It's very interesting, okay? So that's why that's why you have the association area. So we're going to practice as we connect the dots. But that's for now. Because we're going to try to connect the dots. This is you, right? The stimulus here, how it goes up, and then it goes to the association, then so let's say you receive the stimulus right here. Let's say it's touch, someone touched you. It's going to go up to the primary somatic center, which is in your parietal lobe, right? So I feel a touch. Then the association area will tell me what was that? I felt, let's say I felt a hamburger. It's right here. Of course, you coordinate that with your visual area. Then you want to smile because it's food. So from here, you're going to go to the primary, the premotor area. Because the premotor area, so from here to premotor area, because the premotor area actually contains the recipe of which muscles you need to contract. So you pick up the muscles, what muscles you need is here, then you go to the primary motor area, and the primary motor area is responsible for stimulating those muscles that you need to contract so you can do what you want to do. Okay? And we're going to follow this flow chart as we move on with the study of the spinal cord. It will all make sense. Okay? The last part of this chapter is about the cranial nerves. So I have these slides over here. Hopefully, it's like a summary, including the association areas. So hopefully, it will help you. That's just a basic, a taste of neurology, the function of the brain. Does it make sense that we test the function of the brain by using an EEG, right? Because neurons, they fire an action potential. So it's charge driven, and the charge can be monitored by doing these brain waves. So we have the alpha, beta, theta, and delta waves. And they monitor, when you're awake, your eyes are open, but you're resting, you should have this alpha. When your eyes are open, you're resting, and you have this one, then they know there's a pathology. That's how they. But when you're active, see, intense concentration, you're doing activities, this is what you should have. And then, in children, this is normal. But this, if you find this, and you're resting, that's not normal. That's how they try to compare that one. And of course, this one is if you're in a coma or you're in deep sleep, that's what you should have. So the last are your cranial nerves. And now we're studying the first part of the peripheral nervous system, which are your nerves, okay? So there are 12 cranial nerves. And the way I want you to study your cranial nerves is to write them down. In your test, by the way, I will already name them for you in case you forget. Your job is to figure out how they work. Okay, so then next write S. So S for mainly sensory in function, M for mainly motor, B for both sensory and motor in function. So this is your olfactory. I will name them for you already. Optic, oculomotor, cochlear, Okay, so how do you test them? That's what I want you to know. How do you test for your olfactory nerves? Olfactory means smell. So you put roses maybe. If you're able to smell that, then check for olfactory nerve, right? It's working. How do you test for optic nerve? Optic. Yeah. If you can see, then you can check that one. You cannot test for any motor function of this one because they're only sensory. How about oculomotor? There's no sensory part to the test of this one. This is motor. And so these 3, 4, and 6 are the ones that move your eyeball. But cranial nerve number 3, in addition to moving your eyeball, that's the one that's responsible for your pupillary light reflex. So you shine a light, don't they shine a light to your eye? The right eye and then the left eye, they look for the pupillary constriction. They're testing for cranial nerve number 3. Cranial nerve number 4, again, only motor. So they don't have any sensory function. Cranial nerve number 4, they ask you to follow your pen, right, without moving your head, because it stimulates your, it's the one that tells your superior oblique to contract. So follow my pen down without moving your head. Follow it down. If you're able to see it, that means cranial nerve number 4, the trochlear nerve, is working. How do you test for trigeminal? It's both sensory and motor. So trigeminal, it's responsible for sensations in your face. So what do? You slap that person. I'm just testing for cranial nerve 5, right? If you felt that, then it's working. Or you pinch, or you put something cold or hot. And then also, this is the one responsible for chewing. So you ask the patient to clench the teeth, and you see that muscles of the masseter, right, for mastication. If you see that, that means that's working. And then abducens, it moves your eyeball. It stimulates your lateral rectus and your medial rectus. So follow my pen to the right and to the left without moving your head. If you're able to do that, this is working. Motor only. Facial. The facial has sensory and motor. But the best way to test that is you have the patient smile. So it's the one that for facial symmetry, facial expressions. Can you smile for me if you're not able to smile? Or you heard the Bell's palsy? So that's injury to cranial nerve number 7. It's the one also responsible for saliva. So if you have dry mouth, you may have that one. So 7, 9, and 10 make your saliva. Then your vestibulocochlear, it used to be called auditory, cranial nerve number 8. So if you hear me, that means your cranial nerve number 8 is working, but there's 2 parts to that one. It's also the one that's for balance and equilibrium. So you have the patient stand on one leg. If that's working, you're normal, okay? And then you have the glossopharyngeal, cranial nerve number 9, G for gag. Don't they put a tongue depressor and make you gag? That's because they're testing for this cranial nerve. So if this is working, you're okay. Next, vagus nerve. This is the longest cranial nerve. This is the one that is responsible for voice, the voice box in the larynx. That's the one that tells it to tense so that you have voice, so you have the patient. You say, open your mouth and say, ah, and you look for the uvula. Do you know what the uvula is?
It's a little hangy down
The
thing.
little thing, yeah. You look at that uvula and it has to be in the center. If it's not in the center, you know there's something wrong with this one. Then the spinal accessory, you say, it's the one that moves, that contracts your neck muscles. So you tell the patient, bow or move, shake your head like this. And also, you tell the patient, raise your shoulders, and raise your shoulders against me, pushing this down. And if you're able to do that, this is working. And then finally, hypoglossal. So this is the one that moves your tongue. So you say, can you stick your tongue out? If they stick out their tongue, it has to be in the center. Remember, they're pairs. If it moves to the right, then that means this one is not working. You see? And that's how I want you to test for your cranial nerves. To study your cranial nerves. What happens to them when they get injured. Okay? And you're done with the brain.
The vagus nerve?
So,
Is that the one that can actually cause you the vasovagus reaction,
Yes.
make you pass out like
Yes.
when you're straining to have a bowel movement? which is why we don't want heart patients. And
Yes, it's also, and we're going to study the autonomic part when we study the autonomic nervous system. So now let me see if she's done. Oh, she's not done. We're going to go get our cats and get lab coats, get your tools to dissect your cat. For today, I just want you to skin the cat. Yeah, we have to take the skin off. So when you get your cat,
there's lots of us, so somebody
it
else
will
can
be
do
laying
that.
down like this.
In the I surrender position.
The first thing you do, you don't make fun of your cat, okay? We're going to study the cat all the way until we get to Bio 242. We learn a lot from the cat. So the first thing I want you to do before you even open up the package is you name your cat, you write the name of the cat, and you write your names on the package. I'll give you a marker. Use scissors to open the plastic, not the scalpel, okay? So this is how your cat will look like. I want you to make an incision from here, from the mental, all the way down to here, and then go around the bojangles. Then you go skin all the way here to the paws. Same here, same here, same here. Then I want you, the scalpel should be facing you, not towards the cat, so you don't make a mistake of cutting through the muscle. So you peel all the way to the back, up to this part. Try not to take out the skin completely because we want to keep the skin as a covering because we want to preserve it until next quarter. So up to here, so leave that part attached, but skin it all the way there. Here, you skin all the way, okay? Same with all the limbs, you skin all the way. You leave the tail. And then here, only up to this one. We're going to study one muscle here, which is your sternomastoid, and that's it. Maybe thyroid, we'll see. Okay? And that's it for today. Some of you will be fast, and if you're fast, you have your list of muscles that you're supposed to label. I know you already know your muscles. The muscles in humans are the same as in the cats, where they're located, the lats, the trapezius. So the deltoids, biceps, triceps. You're just going to add a few more. What you will notice is actually there's not only superficial, there's also even deep muscles. And you see them. You see them when you pull the muscles, they really will pull on the bones, and that's how you move. Okay?